If I were to ask you to give me the name of the worst VTuber agency or corporation to have ever existed, you'd probably have a hard time choosing one if you've been keeping up with the VTubing industry for these last few years. Most likely though, it would be a choice between two agencies in particular. The first one would be Nijisanji, an agency worth over $1 billion on the Japanese stock market that almost made one of its top talents leave this planet back in 2024 because of how toxic its internal work culture truly was. But then you'd probably think, well, that's really bad, but there's also VShoujo, one of the most respected VTuber agencies who scammed their top talent out of $500,000 she was meant to give to charity. I mean, really, tragically, there's no shortage of examples like this. But what if I told you that both of these answers are wrong? What if I told you that there was a VTuber agency out there that was worse than these two combined? An agency so scummy that they would manage to lose 40 of their talents within less than a year. An agency so disgusting that they would send lawyers after your fans if they had something negative to say about them, and an agency so unforgivable that they would publish your social security number for everyone to see on your own Twitter account just because you didn't want to renew your contract with them. I'm of course talking about Wactor. And shockingly enough, these events actually did happen, and they weren't even half of the depraved acts they would pull. And recently, they set a very dangerous precedent, not just for this industry, but for any entertainment industry in general, by pursuing some of these ex-talents in international courts outside of Japan. Guys, my jaw was on the floor researching this video, and seeing that this agency not only still managed to exist to this day, but is still being very concerningly dangerous, I thought that we had to talk about it. So you already know the drill. Let's do this right after the sponsor. A special occasion is something that deserves to be celebrated, like a birthday, your sibling having a child, or Ethereum Restart launching Global Fest on September 25th. That's why they'll be giving out 10 free pulls with the code Etheria0925, a 7-day check-in event, and a free SSR selector where you can choose your favorite SSR character instantly. But that's not all. If you're a returning player, you'll get double drops on materials, a return banner that guarantees you an SSR character that you select, and so much more, like 14 days full of rewards. You'll need these rewards because there's going to be 2 new SSR characters that look incredible, a new limited skin, and of course, a fresh real-time arena season that includes a new Hyperlinker Cup. The game's really going all out here by even partnering up with some of the top Chinese pro gamers. So if that all sounds good to you, then make sure to check the link in the description or the pinned comment and get Ethereum Restart on either mobile or PC today. Thank you, Ethereum Restart, for sponsoring this video. Alright, so Wactor would unofficially begin its activities on April 2018, when they would post this ad on auctiondebut.com. In this ad, they would say that they're a newly established VTuber production team seeking voice actors between the ages of 18 and 28. They would then officially establish themselves as a company more than a year later on July 2019, calling themselves Wactor Inc. But a couple of months before that, on May 2019, they would announce their first 3 talents, individually and by name. This would definitely be different from other VTuber agencies which would launch their talents in waves, or groups. This would allow all the members to have a common identity and collab together to make each other grow. In Wactor's case though, there was none of that. They would stream by themselves in a disorganized manner, and it felt like they weren't even part of the same corporation. I mean, they weren't even collabing together. But Wactor's management didn't really seem to be too bothered by this because in the meantime, they were too busy recruiting more people. A few months later, they would recruit Miserably. That's a name you should remember for later. But I'm not even going to bother telling you the names of the other VTubers, because around the end of 2019, Wactor would recruit 6 more. You know that piece of advice you get when you open a business, which is don't expand too quickly? Well, Wactor was just taking that advice and wiping their ass with it. By the end of 2019, this newly established company had 11 talents. Eventually, as things would start to get very confusing, they'd finally divide their talents into groups and give them names. The first 5 members would be officially called the Miserably Wave. And the other 6 talents they would recruit at the end of 2019 would have 5 be a part of the second wave, which was called Sister Unit. I know, very creative name. Apparently, it was meant to be called Kemomizu, but they couldn't agree on a name, so yeah, there you have it. Anyway, finally you'd have the 6th member in their own group because they were meant to be a VTuber that would stream exclusively on Bilibili, which is pretty much Chinese YouTube. So Wactor was already trying to diversify. They essentially debuted 2 different waves. The first one barely got any footing before they decided to announce the second one. And within just a few months, they would start dropping like flies. This was already a red flag, obviously, when you see members of your first wave start to leave in under a year. But this was 2019. VTubing was still niche in Japan and unrecognized globally. Because of that, people wouldn't really look too deep into this, thinking that this might have been caused by some disagreements or the growing pains of a new company, choosing to instead celebrate the short legacy of these talents while saying goodbye. So as I said, in 2019 they had 11 talents, and by 2020, by March 2020, they had 6. So essentially half their talent roster had just left within a few months. It was safe to say that this company that had just started was already at death's door. Unlike other more successful corporations, nothing they were doing was calculated. It seemed like they were throwing poop on the wall and hoping it sticks. And while that normally wouldn't have worked, Wactor just seemed to be in the right place at the right time. During the year 2020, VTubing would go from this niche little hobby to a money printing industry in Japan. But big corporations also realized that there was also huge potential in English-speaking markets. In the second half of 2020, many of the bigger corporations would start launching English branches. They would end up finding incredible success. Wactor, on the other hand, would take a completely untraditional approach. Instead of starting their own English branch, they would do something completely different. On May 2021, their second generation would debut: Shino Lila, Kurari Rose, Hoshino Suzu, and Hina Misora. And what made these talents special is that while they spoke Japanese, they also happened to speak Spanish. And due to this, Wactor would unexpectedly strike gold. Look, if we take the example of YouTube, Mexico is the 5th country with the most YouTube viewers. This is just one of many Spanish-speaking countries, and I mean, honestly, Brazil is 3rd. They can probably make an effort to understand Spanish just like I do when a Canadian speaks French. So that's obviously a lot of people. The Spanish language is also very popular on Twitch, with over 130,000 viewers waiting to watch their favorite streams. I also have to mention the fact that the most watched Twitch stream of all time had peaked at 9.1 million viewers and was a Spanish live streamer by the name of iBuy. The second most watched stream is not even half that amount, it's sitting at 2.5 million. This was a market almost every agency was completely sleeping on, but it had essentially been given to Wactor on a silver platter. Their second wave would gain so much popularity that they would start to collab with Niji Sanji live streamers. These collabs typically wouldn't happen through DMs and be spontaneous. No, they would be planned way ahead between the companies themselves. The fact that Wactor was able to collab with a corporation as big and important as Niji Sanji at the time was a testament to how successful their second wave was. And it wouldn't take long for the fruits of their labor to finally show, because by July 31st, 2021, Wactor would be sure to tell the world and flex that they are now in the top 10 Japanese VTuber agencies when it came to sub count, ranked 8th. This was right in the middle of VTubing's golden age, a very significant achievement. It seemed like those days of Wactor throwing poop on the wall hoping it sticks were long behind us. And with the Spanish community, the sky was the limit. Well, the sky was the limit until they decided to cross a line that no other VTuber agency or corporation had ever dared to cross. Shino Leila was one of the 4 VTubers that were part of that Spanish-speaking second wave. She, just like the other talents that debuted with her, found immense success with the Spanish-speaking community and were able to truly bring Wactor to the top 10 VTubing agencies in Japan. This is why it was extremely shocking to pretty much every fan of hers and Wactor when the company would post on November 28, 2021, a tweet that said, "Notice of suspension of Lila Shino," saying, "We are grateful to our fans for their constant support of our members. We would like to inform you that our company's member Shino Lila has been suspended due to breach of contract. We have already confirmed the facts with her in question and we will make a decision on how to proceed. We apologize to our fans for any concern this may cause. Other members are fine, and we hope that you will continue to support our members as always. Wactor Corporation," signed by the CEO himself, Akira Oishi. Yeah, so that pretty much came out of absolutely nowhere, and there were over 231 replies, mostly in Spanish, begging Wactor to reconsider and hoping that the suspension won't last too long, because I do need to make a distinction here. A suspension is different from a termination. She wasn't being kicked out of the company, she was just being told to pause all her activities. It is, however, seen as a bit of an extreme measure, and it's seen negatively because it's typically the first step you take before terminating a talent. But even with all these factors combined, fans remained hopeful. I mean, come on, this is one of the agency's biggest talents. I'm sure they'll find a solution, right? Well, instead of hope, fans would instead be met with complete and utter silence. That would be until the 23rd of December 2021, so more than a month later, where Shino Layla would post a promotional video of Wactor on her socials saying nothing else. Her page was essentially being used as a marketing tool, while the hundreds of fans in the comments were still demanding answers. What the hell's going on? You can't just use her page for marketing without informing us of what happened to her. Well, enough was enough. By the end of 2021, many of her fans had written letters to Wactor demanding to know when her suspension was going to be over and if she'll be able to continue her activities or just end the contract. They wanted to know this. They were getting tired of the silence. At the same time, they would launch a movement on Twitter with the hashtag #FreeLayla. And even though the community tried their absolute best to force Wactor to finally say something, they would have to wait months until March 2022 to finally get a statement on what's going on. I'm sure that they had many guesses as to what could happen, how Layla had maybe breached the contract, how Wactor would probably react to their statement. But in reality, no one could have ever predicted the sheer horror that they would face when they'd see their favorite VTuber get doxxed by their own agency. On March 2nd, 2022, Wactor would unexpectedly make a tweet on their company page. Here's what it had to say. Report on the damage claim and lawsuit response to blank blank, which is her real name, in parentheses, Shino Layla. This tweet is still up to this day, by the way. It's been 3 years. They still haven't taken it down. The title of this document was Report on the Damage Claim and Lawsuit Response to blank blank. They would go on to say that this whole thing happened because of her problematic conduct. It was discovered that you are engaged in VTuber activities, including monetization outside of the company, which is prohibited by the contract. Her activities were suspended. Even after this suspension, she kept her personal account private and acted as if she was the victim, thereby bringing discredit to the company. It was also confirmed that she instructed her followers not to leak her account to the outside world by taking screenshots of what she said on that private account. Yeah, I think it's fairly obvious. Wactor didn't really bother hiring any English translators, which is why this is so badly translated. But overall, this entire suspension and them having to dox her in public for no reason was because she had a personal social media account, right? She had a personal YouTube channel, a personal Twitter, and would sometimes use those things instead of being Shino Layla 24/7. They would file a claim for damages against Shino Layla and would also take it a step further by saying that they're working with their lawyers to consider legal actions against literal fans of hers that are defaming the company. Fans, right? We're not even talking about talent here. They would end this by saying that they weren't going to respond to any inquiries on the matter, and that the reason why they took so long to respond to this was because it's a very serious problem. This was the first time that a VTuber company or agency had committed the biggest form of taboo you could imagine. VTubers are VTubers because they care about their privacy, their anonymity. The fact that this company was willing to absolutely destroy that anonymity if they had any problems with you as a talent was the worst look imaginable. People were absolutely shocked. Now, usually when someone leaves a VTuber corporation, they also leave behind their identity because that name, that model, the brand itself belongs to the corporation, so they are not legally allowed to mention it. They can't say that I used to be this VTuber at that corporation. This is why the response of the woman who used to be Shino Layla would be so significant. She would quote tweet Wactor's statement and say, since this is published by the company itself, so apparently it looks like I have the right to say I was Shino Layla? Am I the first VTuber in history to be doxxed by her own company? Guys, please get me the trophy. Someone would then ask, what? Isn't it illegal to publicly name someone in this kind of way? To which she would say, yeah, it's illegal, lol, both in Thailand and Japan. She'd specified this since she wasn't even in Japan, she's Thai. Now look, this was already a lot to take in as a fan of Wactor, especially a Spanish-speaking fan that loved the second wave. But this was still the beginning. On the same day that they doxed Shino Layla, they would also suspend Kurari Rose, another member of the second wave. The Spanish community that was handed on a silver platter to Wactor was now getting tired of this company that was seemingly going downhill. The top reply to the suspension tweet would say, please go indie, this company is going downhill, you can collab with whoever you want, you can do whatever you want, we will follow you wherever you go. Now, when VTubers are usually faced with something like this, like a corporation having it out for them, they might back away or silence themselves out of fears of legal repercussions. But what Wactor had done was such a disgusting violation of privacy that the VTubers were not going to just stand idly by, especially with the massive support of their fans. And so the woman behind Shino Layla would come back under a new persona by the name of Eileen Noir, and she would tweet this out almost a month later on April 16th, 2022, saying, I would like to inform you the current situation of me, the person in charge of VTuber character Shino Layla, and a former member of Wactor agency. Please see full detail in the image below. Here's what she had to say. First of all, I would like to apologize for causing concern to everyone. My name is Eileen Noir, and I was in charge of the VTuber character Shino Layla at Wactor. The agency contract between Wactor and I, at the latest, have been cancelled by March 2022. However, on the 2nd of March 2022, Wactor has posted a document on their official social media regarding report of damages claim and legal action against the person in charge of Shino Layla, which exposed my real name that does not need to be exposed at all to the public. Furthermore, the content posted on that social media is not considered as a fact in my point of view, and it terribly damaged my privacy and honor as it is a one-sided information, which is very shocking to me, and I feel terribly sorry for causing this concern to everyone. As of now, I have signed a lawyer contract to handle all of this matter, so I'll refrain from making any further comment regarding this matter at the moment. Moreover, I would like to inform you that the lawyer has already contacted Wactor several times in order to discuss our differences in point of views of both parties. However, at this moment, Wactor has never responded. Therefore, I decided to consult with the lawyer once again, and we have determined that this matter is difficult to resolve through prompt discussions, so I decided to post this letter on my social media account in order to inform the situation to all of Shino Layla fans and related parties. Lastly, I'm terribly sorry for causing concern to everyone. As for future activities, I would like to challenge myself once again to deliver entertainment as Eileen Noir. I would like to take this as an opportunity to start a new journey. I will do my best, and I will be very happy if you support me once again. Signed, Eileen Noir. So yeah, there was no reason for Wactor to release her full name. This was pure and utter pettiness. Her contract was going to expire on March anyway, and it seemed like she wasn't really interested in renewing. When Wactor found that out, they suspended her and stopped her from being able to make money, which is why she started streaming on her personal account. At this point, this wasn't a VTuber agency, it was like dealing with the cartel. But Eileen wasn't the only one to speak out. Marin Marino, who used to be Kurari Rose, would also release a statement at the same exact time, saying that the reason why the contract was terminated was because her and Wactor have cognitive differences and it is difficult to build a trust relationship. She intended to be Kurari Rose until the end of her contract. But seeing that Wactor took her access away from those accounts and didn't let her go live anymore, she couldn't, and it wasn't her intention. She would then specify that on March 2nd, 2022, Wactor hadn't terminated her, they had just suspended her, which means she's technically still under contract, and they weren't intending on letting her go, they wanted her to stay trapped. Kind of like how they had trapped Layla for months. She said that she hired a lawyer as well, but that he had not heard back from Wactor, they seem to be ghosting everyone, and of course apologized to her fans, hoping that they'll follow her on this new journey. So Wactor was truly using every dodgy method in the book here, all in an effort to control their talents and force them to stay with them for extended periods of time, even though they might have signaled that they wanted to leave and not renew their contract. This was very nasty behavior, but it was also concerning because it didn't seem like they had any limits. You pissed them off? Well, you're fair game. It didn't matter if you were a talent or a fan. And after these incidents, people were very well aware of that. To say that things were looking bad for Wactor now was an understatement. In total, they had recruited 18 members and 11 of them were gone. 2 of those members were part of their second generation, the generation that truly put them on the map, and one of them got publicly doxxed. And what wasn't looking good at all for Wactor is that one of the 2 remaining second generation members, Suzu Hoshina, hadn't streamed for a long time, making her fans worry that she'd be next to leave, and unfortunately for them, they'd end up being exactly right. Her exit would of course be a bit less dramatic. She wouldn't get doxxed publicly and dragged through the mud. No, she'd simply say that she had a hard time managing her personal life and her professional life. But that's her probably wanting to avoid any drama, because in reality, if a coworker of mine was publicly doxxed by my own company over some stupid bullshit, I'd want to leave immediately too. And that's exactly what she ended up doing on May 9th, 2022. With only 1 member left from their second generation, and most members having retired already, people thought that Wactor didn't have another year in them, okay? That they were going to close down their doors fairly soon. Well, just like how a cockroach can survive radiation, Wactor would prove itself way more resilient than anyone had anticipated. On July 2022, they would shamelessly celebrate a new milestone. They had reached a total of 200,000 subscribers on all their channels. At the same time, their ridiculous thirst of uncontrollable expansion would continue. And on November 2022, they would open up their first Indonesian VTuber auditions, as well as more auditions for Chinese speakers to stream on Bilibili. And as the idea of male VTubers would go from a very bad joke to an unstoppable enterprise, mostly due to things like the Luxium wave under Nijisanji, Wactor would immediately hop on that train, and by the end of 2022, they would launch their own VTuber male wave with 3 talents. And if that wasn't enough, as all of this was happening, as they were expanding like crazy, they would also open auditions for Spanish-speaking VTubers, purely Spanish. This time, they weren't even looking for Japanese. And so it was definitely weird to see a VTuber company break one of the most fundamental rules of VTubing, all while having over 70% of their roster leave, and yet they still carried on like nothing had happened. But as you might have guessed, that wouldn't last long, because soon enough, the time would come when another one of their talents would piss them off. And what they'd end up doing in retaliation? Well, it would shake the entire VTuber industry to its core. On February 28, 2023, Wactor would post this tweet saying, "Report on the actions taken against those who slander and defame." So remember how in Shino Leila's termination notice where they doxed her, they said that they were considering going after the fans who are also defaming them. Well, this notice was them saying that they had done that against 4 different fans and went ahead and posted an address of those fans that was partially censored. You could, however, see the country, which is Mexico, the city, and the postcode. Look, this company has always been known to be petty. Not only did they openly dox one of their previous talents just because she didn't want to renew her contract, but they were also well known to block anyone who had negative things to say about them on Twitter. Yeah, it seemed like even though this company just kept expanding, they weren't going to let go of this disgusting pettiness. In fact, they were taking it to the next level, going after actual fans of the company and their VTubers and posting their partially censored addresses for everyone to see. Again, I want to specify, Nijisanji, Vishojo, whatever other companies that you think are crazy in this space, no one has ever done this, period. And as astronomically bad as this already is, it would only serve as the appetizer to the main course that would come later. So, remember the second wave? At this point, 3 of them had already left and only Hina Misora remained. Seeing that she was the only Spanish-speaking VTuber left from that very successful wave, her channel grew exponentially, becoming not just one of the biggest VTubers in the agency, but one of the biggest Spanish-speaking VTubers in general. Now on December 8th, 2022, Wactor would tweet this, saying, "Misora Ina is feeling a bit unwell, so she will have to take a break for a while and rest. Surely she also hopes for the same, to return to streaming and spend time with her fans. Thank you very much for your understanding." The replies, as well as the sentiment in general, was just hope for her to get better as soon as possible. The fans were very supportive and they were going to wait for her no matter how long it took. Except it started taking quite a while. On January 2nd, 2023, Ina Misora would make this very simple tweet saying, "Esta hora antoja cereal," which pretty much means that right now I'm craving cereal. Well, I don't know if she knew this, I don't know if anyone could have predicted this, but this would actually end up being the final tweet she would ever make on this account, because after this, no one would hear from her again. People started getting very worried, getting flashbacks to Shino Leila. But the woman behind Misora Ina was not going to let that happen. She didn't want her fans to panic for no reason. So a month later, on February 15th, 2023, she would make this statement on her personal account, saying both in Spanish and in Japanese that as of February 9th, 2023, she has terminated her affiliation with Wactor as the relationship of trust necessary for the proper development of activities has been lost. She apologized for any concern she might have caused her fans by disappearing like this, and said that she will continue being a VTuber as Meika now. The support that she had received after this was huge. She had an incredible community, and they all backed her up. I mean, honestly, at this point, they were probably expecting this to happen, because look at what happened to the previous talents. And speaking of the previous talents, they would also tweet at the same exact time, the same exact day, an update on what's going on with them and Wactor. Eileen Noir, who used to be Shino Leila, would tell the world that she tried to contact Wactor multiple times, but they've been ignoring her since 2022. It's been almost a year now. She wanted to specify this because in the same post where they doxed her, they said they'd be also pursuing her legally. She wanted to confirm that Wactor was only bluffing, that they weren't actually going to do that, it's clear. However, Marin Marino would also post an update at the same exact day, same exact time, and would say that Wactor did respond to her, but they couldn't reach any agreement. On June 1st, 2022, a lawsuit would be filed by Wactor, which is still ongoing. She'd say that she's convinced that her time as Kurari Rose did not violate any rules and that the law can prove her innocence. She then went ahead and thanked her fans. It was safe to say at this point that if Wactor had the same market capitalization on the stock market as Nijisanji, for example, all these tweets would have easily caused a bigger financial catastrophe than what happened to Nijisanji in 2024. Still though, this was extremely damaging to the company because their entire audience that they had built was essentially now against them. They had fired every VTuber that they liked, and they fired them in a way where it was clear they were trying to humiliate them. Things weren't looking good, and Wactor knew this. So what did they do? Did they take a step back and maybe think, you know what, let's change how we do things. Let's try to fix some of the things that are making all our talent leave our company. But as you're probably already anticipating by now, they did the exact opposite of that. The extremely petty and childish management of Wactor would decide to do one of the worst things that have ever been done in VTubing history, and I don't say this lightly in any way. 2 weeks after Meika would post her statement, they would take control of her past account, which is Hina Misora. And on that account, they would post a statement that included her real name, an approximate address of where she lives, and her fucking social security number ID. I want to make this clear. Yes, this actually did happen, and it wasn't some sort of mistake or miscommunication. They would also link a video that had this information in it. They would post this statement on their website, and they would also post it on a post in her YouTube channel. Wactor knew exactly what they were doing, and they were hoping to make her life hell for attempting to leave their company. This post was such a vile, disgusting breach of privacy that you'd see Twitter remove it because it violates their terms of service. But this wouldn't make Wactor back down. Oh no, they would take control of her account again, and in order to avoid getting the post removed by Twitter, they wouldn't attach the statement this time, instead linking a YouTube video that contained all the doxing information anyway. But thankfully, through the efforts of mass reports by her fans, this video would also be removed from YouTube for violating their terms of service. It contained personal information. It was disgusting. And if that wasn't enough, they also took control of her YouTube channel, and as I said, they would make a post with all this info, and as you can see here, this post is no longer available. This is actually the first time I personally see a YouTube community post get moderated like this. That already says a lot. Some people in the community genuinely couldn't believe this. Did we actually just witness a VTuber company not only dox one of their talents, but also show us their government ID, their city, their nationality, like literally everything you need to know about them to stalk them and maybe do horrendous things to them? Well, yes. And now people were very scared to see what they would do with the other talents. People were leaving the company left and right. Were they going to do this every time someone leaves? Well, as they straight up doxed all her personal info, Meika would have a more lighthearted spirit, saying, "Is this the last thing you're going to do while your company falls apart? At least I'm not in the red," hinting that the company wasn't doing too well financially and that she was pretty much leaving a sinking ship, which isn't really hard to believe as a VTuber company when you dox your own talent. And she wasted no time whatsoever. On the same day she got doxed, on February 28th, 2023, she held her debut stream of her new model. It was a huge success and the entire community was right behind her. But look, even though she had her head held high, I'd be lying to you if I said that it was all fun and games. A couple days later, Meika would admit to the world that she always struggled with the idea that she was a half-C, a term in Japan given to people who are only half Japanese. For most of her life, she was ashamed of this. She felt like the statement by Wactor, which doxed her, was meant to fully target that vulnerability, exposing to the world that she is not Japanese, that she's only half, that she currently lives in a country that's not Japan, even going as far as posting her national ID. Nowhere in the statement did it say that she breached the contract, because she hasn't. To her, it was clear. The company and the CEO himself were trying to corner her. She would then admit that if this was the old her, not the current her, that she would have probably tried to leave this planet over this. But that now it's different. She has finally gotten to the point where she can accept herself and won't let these cruel people simply win. She would end this by saying that she's now consulting with a lawyer on the matter and that she genuinely thanks her fans for being here. So overall, a horrendous situation that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemies. To dox someone's name is already ridiculously taboo, especially in VTubing, but bro, her national ID, the equivalent of a social security number, like wow, that is disgusting. At this point, Wactor had lost a lot of money because of this departure and because they had essentially lost the trust of their entire audience. What would follow is a desperate attempt at them trying to recover what little ounce of reputation they had left, and to the surprise of literally no one, it would end up being pathetic and they would fail miserably. On the 28th of February, 2023, the same day they would dox the ever-living shit out of one of their final remaining talents that actually had popularity in their company, Wactor would announce a notice of change in team structure. What this meant is that this whole first wave, second wave structure wasn't going to apply anymore, seeing that the majority of their talents had left. The remaining talents would be split based on their language and what they do, and of course they'd be given a name, similar to how other companies have waves. By this point, you had like maybe 30 members that left or something. It was ridiculous. Like these were the ones that remained. All of these 15 members would be split into different teams, but here's the thing. They would be specifically instructed to have the team name in their name and not have any mention of Wactor in their description or branding. Just as a reminder, they hadn't apologized once for anything they've done so far, so this was them essentially saying, we don't want to take any accountability, so just take our name out of your description and branding, and let's just pretend like nothing happened. Well, that's not how the world works, Wactor. It just simply doesn't. On April 8th, Wactor was supposed to debut a new wave comprised of 2 male VTubers. Yeah, they ended up leaving before the debut. They ended up just jumping ship immediately. Good for them. Wactor had to, in the most humiliating way possible, delete their accounts the day after, before even beginning anything. They had essentially spent money on their models, their marketing, their debut stream, all that for nothing. I need to really drive the point home here. This had never in the history of VTubing happened to an agency or a corporation. It was extremely humiliating. And you want to know what the best part was? Things were only about to get even worse for them. One of the only VTubers that were there from the beginning with Wactor that still were present in 2023 was none other than Misdeeds, the VTuber I told you to remember from the beginning of the video. Well, see, the thing with her was fans were spreading a very nasty rumor about her, and it was starting to gain a lot of traction. Those rumors said that she was sleeping with the CEO of Wactor because she was getting some preferential treatment. It seemed like she was getting the cooler projects, the cooler events, even though back when the second wave was still around, they wouldn't be getting anything close. Well, barely a week after Wactor had revealed the national ID number of one of their talents, she would announce her graduation because the harassment had gotten way too much for her. What was more tragic here is that this statement was written by her family, because according to them, a few days before the statement was even released, she had attempted to leave this planet. Her family would go on to say that she'd be ceasing all activities as Misdeeds, and it didn't seem like she was going to continue as an independent entertainer. This was it for her. Now look, we don't know if she actually did have relations with the CEO. Would that be hard to believe in a company like Wactor? No. I can definitely see the CEO saying, hey, I'll give you more stuff and not dox you publicly if you give me what I want. For example, I mean, come on, it's not that hard to imagine. But because of this, Wactor had essentially lost one of its final founding members. And while I'm sure that they were very heartbroken at this news, soon enough, this would actually end up being the least of their worries. Things were getting comically bad for the company. It was ridiculous. False ID sums it up perfectly, so watch.
And now back to Wactor, a VTuber agency that has produced 40 different VTubers, but now at the time of this recording only has 4 active VTubers.
This was uploaded on September 25th, 2023. And yes, you heard that right. They had over 40 VTubers at some point, and now they were just down to 4 active VTubers. That's because as early as 2022, with the majority being in 2023, especially after the public national ID number doxing, over 14 VTubers under Wactor had not tweeted or streamed or done anything for prolonged periods of time. Now, based on the official Wactor audition pages, we know that every VTuber that signs up with them has a 1-year contract to start. Seeing that all these disappearances exceeded 1 year, so the contract, we could just assume they're not with the company anymore, but the company didn't bother announcing it. And now, of course, you would mistakenly think, Mujin, things can't get worse from here, right? Like, come on. They already doxed 2 talents publicly. They had 40 VTubers, now they have 4. Can things truly get worse than this? Oh, buddy. We're not even halfway through the iceberg. 2024 was going to be a new year for Wactor. On January 16th, they would officially rebrand. They would no longer be called Wactor, but would become 910 Inc. Apparently, the way their logo looks is meant to resemble the word cute in Japanese. But I personally like 910 because it sounds as soulless as this company actually is. With the rebranding came a new website and, of course, auditions, the one thing that they love to consistently do for years now. But they didn't get to celebrate this rebranding for barely a month before a disaster struck in the heart of the company. Remember how they had like barely 4 talents remaining at their company after losing like 36? Yeah, well, on February 2024, as the entire VTubing industry was absolutely shocked at what was going on with Nijisanji and Selen Tatsuki, every single remaining member of Wactor would pretty much leave the company and publish a statement revealing to us just how inhumane the working conditions in this company truly were. The first talent, Nimori Micharo, would say that she was forced by Wactor to do things that were not in her contract. And when she complained, they would simply change the contract as she was already working for them, which is literally illegal, and that she's been putting up with unreasonable pressure and instructions for a long time, to the point where she had to take medication in order to simply sleep. Another talent, Himaragi Ageha, would make this statement, saying that while under Wactor, she was forced to perform work not included in the contract, same as the Marima Chamo, the amount of staff work was clearly not proportional to the amount of money involved. Within the company, she would experience fearful and high-pressure behavior as well as sexual or power harassment. She would even receive instructions that prohibit taking prescribed psychiatric medication. She would say, "Until now, I did not have the courage to press charges because I owed my agency the money I needed for my activities. However, I found myself in a situation where I was under mind control of the office management for a lengthy period of time and reached my mental and physical limits." I think this is a bad translation. Mind control could be anything, like gaslighting or whatever, but you get the point. More specifically, I suffered from severe withdrawal symptoms when I stopped taking my psychotic medication. This led to repeated self-harm and becoming dependent on alcohol. Finally, in March of the year before last, I attempted to leave this planet but failed, and was yet given a directive order to continue my activities. I now suffer from a conversion disorder and will be hospitalized in the future because I have difficulty walking and speaking. Because of this, I have decided that it is no longer possible for me to establish a trusting relationship with my office. Bro, what do you mean a trusting relationship? Prisoners are treated better. Regarding the accusations above, we have already consulted with relatives and lawyers and recorded and videotaped everything. In the future, we intend contacting the company through our lawyers, including payment of debts. So yeah, absolutely dystopian, like ridiculous. The fact that you would force someone to not take their medication and force them to work after attempting to leave the planet, I just can't understand what the hell's going on. I'm telling you, my jaw dropped multiple times researching this video. Another talent would also leave the company by the name of Kobe Ururu, saying that he couldn't stand how people were treated in the company, including himself, specifying that he had witnessed many VTubers suffer so much damage because of this company. And finally, you'd have Tenjo Yuga expressing the same things, more specifically when it comes to the contracts. They had pointed out to management that this is a fake contract, this can't like legally apply, right? Well, whenever one of the talents would ask questions about the contract or have second thoughts, they'd be repeatedly threatened by Wactor. This, much like everything else they were doing, was extremely illegal. Again, I'd like to specify this was all happening as the Selen Tatsuki controversy was taking place with Nijisanji, so people weren't really able to give this the attention it deserves. The fact that this company wasn't really established to make money. The CEO practically made it to take advantage of people, to make them go in debt, unable to leave, and to simply physically and mentally abuse them whenever he liked. It was absolutely disgusting, and they essentially had lost all of their talent. No surprise there. But as you've seen so far in this video, this company is so pathetic and desperate to stay relevant that they would literally do anything just to stay afloat with a crumb of relevancy. A few months would pass by, and Wactor's newest strategy in order to gain some sort of relevancy again was to commit yet another frowned upon industry taboo that no one had done before. Seeing that they had like no talents left, they decided to bring in new actors to revive dead characters, starting with Mitsurugi Leah. They would reopen the channel, would reuse the same model, but would have a different voice behind her. By the end of 2024, they would officially open auditions to revive dead VTubers with new actors. This is genuinely one of the worst things you can do. Look, if you don't watch VTubers, maybe you wouldn't understand the gravity of the situation. But I mean, just think, when you watch an anime and really enjoy someone's voice and then they get recast halfway through a season, you'll probably be pissed, right? Yeah, think of it that way, except this isn't just a voice actor, this is an entire personality. This is someone that you'll buy merch of and will support whenever they do new projects. And now they're being bastardized with a new actor, showing you how much the company doesn't give a single shit about them and therefore doesn't give a shit about you. If it wasn't obvious yet, taboos didn't mean anything for Wactor. And judging by the view count of Mitsurugi Leah today in 2025, when they had just streamed 2 days ago, getting 500 total views on a live stream of 2 hours means that she probably had maybe 10 live viewers. Okay, fine, maybe 50. It's safe to say things aren't going well, and I can't imagine what the new voice actress is going through right now. Because even though Wactor changed their name to become Cute Inc. or whatever, the management didn't change, and we have proof of that. Look, by 2025, it was already a miracle that this company even existed. But it seemed like through partnerships and maybe selling some private shares, they were able to still remain. And unfortunately for literally every human being on Earth, they were still trying their best to succeed as a VTuber corporation. Seeing that they had lost most of their talent, they tried their best to recruit already established content creators like Devil Nya. You see, Devil wanted to make some friends and collaborate more often in the VTubing space. This is kind of hard to do as a VTuber, especially in the Japanese scene, where most people only do so within their own corporate boundaries. So she expressed interest in joining Wactor, and Wactor welcomed her. Both Wactor and Devil had announced to the world that she was planning to debut, and as they were planning that debut, Devil, in a now deleted tweet on March 9th, 2025, would announce to the world that upon further consideration, she changed her mind and will not be joining Wactor. Probably the best decision she's ever made in her life. She wouldn't really give us much detail about her decision, except saying that it was a very scary world, most likely referencing Wactor's past actions. This pissed off Wactor so much. On the same day, they would make a statement in which they try their best to convince the entire world that they're actually the victims here. Now, of course, Wactor can't really make statements without leaking something, of course. In this case, thankfully, there weren't any names, national ID numbers, locations, or anything, but they would leak a Discord message from Devil that was sent to, I guess, one of the managers or higher-ups of Wactor, with her saying, "After seeing how things are, I do not feel like the others here are serious about their VTubing activities. As such, I do not see the point in continuing in this environment." They were essentially trying to make her out to be a mean girl, someone who was insulting their talent and their company, thinking that she was above everyone else. But come on, by now people knew better than to just trust Wactor for their word. Their track record was abysmal, and for good reason. In a now deleted tweet, Devil would quote tweet that statement with the actual full message. Remember how she said that she wanted to join an agency to make friends and collab with people? Yeah, well, in her full explanation, she would say that she felt like most VTubers at Wactor did VTubing as a side hustle, that they didn't do it full time. It wasn't what she was looking for, she just didn't fit there. And in that context, it's very reasonable. Wactor would again look like complete and utter pathetic clowns, and the top reply to their post would be, well, if they make such a threatening announcement, it will only reinforce what they're saying about this scary world, referencing Devil Nia's tweet. The second top reply said, "Don't even think about doxing her, you bastards." The whole thing was very funny. They were saying that she had damaged their company reputation when no one had done that except Wactor over the last few years. But unfortunately, as I already said, just like a cockroach, you can never get rid of Wactor. Even after being embarrassed, humiliated, made out to be one of the most pathetic VTuber agencies I've ever seen, in the summer of 2025, they would come back in the public limelight to prove to us that even though they've already gone very low, they can still go way lower. On August 30th, 2025, Wactor would post a press release on their website saying that they had sued 4 individuals for serious past breaches of contract, so previous talents, and 1, with the courts ordering all of those talents to pay over 10 million yen combined to Wactor, which means over $60,000. Now, of course, when this news was initially posted to Reddit and other social media, most people were quick to blame Japan for its very weird laws, like the defamation law, which says, "A person who defames another by alleging facts in public shall, regardless of whether such facts are true or false, be punished by imprisonment with or without work for not more than 3 years or a fine of not more than 500,000 yen. So yes, you read that right. If you're working a job in Japan and your boss touches you without your consent and you tweet about it or talk about it to others, even if you manage to convince the police to put him in jail, he can still sue you for defamation because you ruined his reputation." So of course, most comments thought that, oh, you know, these lawsuits were in Japan, they were taking advantage of Japanese laws. Japan's clearly the problem here, right? But here's what shocked the f*** out of me. Only 2 of these lawsuits were in Japan. One was in Spain, and one was in Paraguay. Unfortunately, due to Wactor doxing Hina Misora, we can guess that she's the one in Paraguay that was sued by them and lost her lawsuit against them. The press release details that this involves 1 Japanese male, 1 Japanese female, 1 Spanish female, and 1 Paraguay female. Some people have guessed that the defendants are Hina Misora, Luna Rurin, Tenjo Yuga, and Uminobushi Clara. And if that wasn't bad enough, Wactor would say that they were preparing to file additional lawsuits against similar breaches of contract using these rulings as precedents. This means that they're going after even more talents that had breached their contracts according to them in the past. No one was going to be safe. The Japanese female that lost the lawsuit was someone who had said that she was sexually harassed at the company. So not only was she sexually harassed in the company according to her, but now she has to pay them a huge sum of money. And you want to know the worst thing? All these lawsuits, including the Spanish and Paraguayan one, have judgments that can be enforced by force, such as by seizing property. This means that these poor VTubers that were barely paid a cent under this dystopian company now have to pay them over $10,000 and can risk losing their own property because of that. This is so bad. And I really have no idea how they could have won outside of Japan. I don't know which kind of lawyers they're hiring, maybe the same lawyers Nintendo hires. But if what they're saying is true, other companies such as Nijisanji, for example, can go after their previous talents simply for speaking out, making them pay huge amounts of money and pretty much using legal extortion. Not enough people are talking about this. This is actually dystopian. I'm just completely shocked. I really hope the people that they sued that now have to pay them over $68,000 can find a solution. I hope that they're doing okay. And I hope that the freaks at Wactor never win another lawsuit again. God. Anyway, now you know that this company unfortunately still exists, and that with every passing day, they're doing a better and better job at being the worst company you've ever heard of. Please be careful out there. Never sign a contract without hiring a lawyer. I don't care how much it costs. Just please hire a lawyer. Don't get scammed and stay safe out there. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Don't forget to use the code Mujin on Gamersubs to get 10% off, and I'll see you in the next video whenever that is. I love you so much. Mwah.